Yeah, hello everyone. Very good afternoon. How are you doing all? So, so I think we have all gathered today on this Saturday afternoon. So, how was your week? All good? So I am really excited for this masterclass, right? Where we want to discuss about how to get like good software development jobs, right? So of course we have a lot of agenda to discuss in this class, right? But before I even go ahead, right, I would want to do some sort of interaction with you guys, right? And so can you please tell me, let's say your name, place, let's say experience and background, let's say in less than 20 words, uh, right? So can you guys please tell me in the chat your name, place, experience, background all together, so that you're not, let's say, spamming the chat. Okay, I'm doing great, thanks for asking, Upendra. Okay, okay, can you please mention in the chat? बताओ आप लोग. आप लोग chat पे, can you please mention your name, place, your experience, just background, just to get some idea about what are you doing, right? So hang on. बताओ यार आप लोग chat पे. ओके, फ्रॉम मथुरा, मैकेनिकल इंजीनियरिंग. और कोई नहीं है क्या? ओके, यू गेन नॉलेज इन रिकॉर्डिंग लेक्चर. ओके, ऑलराइट. दीपक सिंह गहलोत, यू आर फ्रॉम इंदौर. You are a fresher in civil engineering. Okay, no experience. All right, no worries. Mm-hmm. Anyone else? बताओ आप लोग. Okay, so I think we can sort of get on with it. So I'm just sharing my screen again. All right. Okay, no experience, poor background. All right. Uh, okay, Akash Sain, you are from Chhatarpur. You have completed BTech in Indore. Okay, great. Just give me a second. All right. So Vinayak from Bagalkot, no experience. You have done BSc in PCM. All right. Mrityunjay from Jharkhand, you have done computer science engineering. Okay, great. Right? Can I? All right. So let's get on with it. Right. So the agenda for today is we want to sort of discuss. So I do not have a presentation per se, because I wanted this to be more interactive. So we are going to scribble a lot of stuff today. So we're all going to sort of do a lot of interaction in this masterclass. I hope you'll participate. So the first thing that I want to, of course, talk about is my personal experience, so that you have credibility about what I'm talking, right? So I'll give you guys a bit of my personal experience. Then the first thing that we'll start with is discuss what is even software development, right? So we'll discuss that. We'll spend, let's say, 2 3 minutes on that, and then we'll jump to understanding the full stack web development roadmap, right? So we want to understand what's the ideal roadmap that you should follow. Then we'll talk about what are the job roles and skills required. So we'll look at some job boards. We'll see what are the companies expecting from a developer, right? Then we'll give some ideas about how to nail interviews, right? What kind of questions are being asked, right? What should you be prepared for or around? So we'll discuss all of that. And then at the end, we'll give a basic preview of our flagship full stack web development course. and we'll be open to Q&A towards the end. So if you guys have any question, there is a Q&A section. You can put all your questions there, and I think I'll be taking those up, right? So are you guys clear with the agenda for today? So should we go ahead? Okay, great. So all right, just give me a second. Okay, great. So I want to talk a bit about my personal experience. So I'll just, yeah, just give me a second. All right. So overall, so this is, let's say, the timeline. So let's go back to 2016. That is when I graduated from IIT Kharagpur. Okay. So I did something called civil engineering, right? Not something that you'll expect from, let's say, a product and tech guy, right? So I've done civil engineering. So I graduated in 2016, right? But my first job was more or less of a risk analyst at American Express. So I worked between 2016 and 2017 at American Express. I was a risk analyst, right? So, but I was doing some data science modeling as well. So this is what I was doing. Then in 2018, right? So between this period, I was working at a company called as Global Analytics. Again, my profile was a bit heavy in data science initially. So this is what I did overall, and I was doing data science work, right? Then I worked with HSBC for 2 years, right? I was a data scientist at HSBC. I was doing a lot of, let's say, applying a lot of NLP and uh, those stuff on a lot of financial data, right? So I was doing sort of sell side research for investment for our institutional investors. So this is what more or less we were doing. Um, so I was a data scientist there. Okay. So of course not a developer so far, right? But um, but in 2020 we started AlmaBetter, right? So in October we started AlmaBetter. We did our first cohort, right? And we of course started as a data science. We started a data science program because of course our expertise was there. But now over the course of last 3.5 years, right? So I've spent a lot of time thinking about and building the product and the engineering infrastructure required for, let's say, build for making sure that everything is running smoothly, right? Whether be it, let's say, your student platform, it could be the coach platform, it could be the internal business team or admin platform, right? So we have spent a lot of time thinking about these products, and then of course additionally we have spent a lot of time building the infrastructure required to run all of this, right? So at times of course we have to we had to face a lot of challenges in terms of scaling, in terms of let's say what should we be using for this particular service. So we have done a lot of that, right? So more or less I have a lot of experience um, of around, let's say, 3.5 years in developing product and engineering. So probably you can trust my word, right? So whatever that we are going to talk, right? So this has been more or less my journey. Of course in the future I do, I see myself as a technologist, right? I also see myself as a educator, and before being even an entrepreneur, right? So I feel that I'm more of an educator and technologist. I'm really fascinated by a lot of developments that we are seeing in technology, and it's not just, let's say, the software, but everywhere around us, right? So we are seeing a lot of developments in, let's say, Gen AI, right? And that I've done a bit of that as well in my in history. So we are seeing a lot of innovative technologies coming every now and then. But of course today we want to really focus on the software technologies, right? Especially will of course dive deep into the web development technologies that will require and so that we can understand those, learn those, and then apply those. And of course, the main objective is that you want to get a job, right? But of course, we want to really equip ourselves. We want to have a really strong understanding, deep understanding of the things that will use to build quality software, right? Because if you look at the world today, right, uh, really good software are like pretty difficult to find, right? So in this age, um, using chat gpt or let's say other tools which can generate code, right? So writing software has become easier, right? Maybe creating designs have also become easier, shipping products have also become easier, right? But what we are essentially lacking is basically we know how to write good software, right? But their lack of like really good ideas, right? And because people are sort of jumping onto writing software, and they have this culture of shift fast, let's say shift fast, shift quick, right? So we're not getting a lot of really good quality software, right? Of course, I think we can really count good software if we let's say explore the internet, but they're like not so easy to find, right? So there are like very few apps which are like really good in terms of their let's say overall product experience, design, and then of course the engineering which is required to sustain that infrastructure. But I feel in this age, because it has become easier to write software, right, people are not writing like very quality software. That's like the irony. But of course, we'll want to also discuss some things around there as well. Okay. So now I think we should move ahead and talk about what is software development, right? So I want to know from you guys, right? So what do you think, right? So what kind of so what does software development mean, right? You know what a software is, right? So I just want to know from you guys, can you tell me a bit about what do you think is a software, right? So what do you think is a software? बताओ आप लोग चैट पे. ओके. बताओ चैट पे guys, what do you think is a software, right? You can take your time. Maybe we can, let's say, uh, wait for a second, right, or a minute. बताओ. Right? So a software is basically, if you look at this, right, a software is basically a program, right? It's basically a program, right? Or let's say some piece of code, right, or some instructions basically. So it's basically a program, or you can call, let's say, a set of instructions, right, that we can ask, let's say, a specific computer, right? So we can ask a specific computer to uh, so basically software is basically a program, right, which can perform some task, right? And of course that task can be executed to let's say on a specific computer, right? So we can ask a particular computer, right, to process a set of instructions or compile a program, right, so that we can get a particular output, right? So this is what essentially software is, right? Essentially a program, right, which can work, let's say, not maybe on your mobile devices, right? So not only your, let's say, mobile phones, but it can be a whole lot of other soft, right? So it can be, of course, TV as well, right? And of course you have your laptop, right? So there are also programs running on TVs, right? So you think about any smart electronics today, right? And they might, or let's say normal electronics, right, they're also running some software as well. So think about, let's say, smart fridges, right? So they are also, right, airline, right, or airplanes basically, right? They're also using a lot of, let's say, really smart software, right? Because you see everything is autopilot, more or less, right? So how is it running, right? So there is a piece of software which is controlling, which is giving very necessary and essential instructions to the hardware, right? And that is sort of controlling the entire mechanics of the machine, right, which is the airplane in this case, right? So so we have software all around us, right? So if you look at your Apple Watch, right, so that also have a lot of software, let's say, built into the device, right? And it has a lot of sensors, so that, and it has software which sort of reads the sensors, let's say, sensors data, and send it to the cloud, right? Can you guys tell me some other device name? What do you think, right? What are the devices that we know, right, might be running some software on them, right? Guys, can you tell me in the chat? और बता सकते हो और क्या हो सकता है? Where are we running software, right? Data centers, right? Those are only computers. Okay, anything else? Guys, I would want, I really encourage some participation from you. So what do you think, right? Basically here we're all here to learn, right? So why not, let's do some a quick interaction, right? And hopefully, yeah, this can benefit maybe you and or someone else as well, right? So so overall, whole idea is, right, due to the advent in less electronics, right? So Facebook, Instagram, right? So I'm okay, Akash, I get your point, but the point is, I'm asking, let's say, what are the devices, right, on which we can run a software, right? So hardware consists of like pure physical elemental things, right? So it can be metal, it can be, let's say, some plastic, or maybe, of course, any good computer today, right, will have, let's say, a really good integrated circuit chip, right? And it will have some memory, some as in storage, right? It will have some RAM, right, on which it can do, let's say, some a quick instructions, right, or quick task. Okay, so overall we know, basically know what is software, right? So now, of course, the field of computer science, right, which is required to build, or which is important to build software, is what we call as software development, right? So so software development is essentially a field where we are developing software, right? And not only just developing, right, but we are maintaining software, right? We are building an infrastructure to run the software, maintain the software, and of course update the software as time goes on, right? AR wearable devices, right? So you see, let's say AR glasses which were launched by Meta, right? So that is also running a piece of software, right? So, or let's say Vision Pro. So we are like surrounded by technology, and it's like we're only going to get deeper into it, right? So as I told you, software development is more or less building quality software, maintaining it, and then, of course, updating it, right, adding new features over time, right? But overall, this is what it is, right? So so now I think we want to really move ahead and talk about, let's say, certain areas of software engineering, right? So अगर आप देखो, सॉफ्टवेयर इंजीनियरिंग में बहुत टाइप के engineers या engineering कर रहे हैं, right? So there are folks who are doing a lot of, let's say, different kinds of engineering, and just want to highlight some of it, right? So अगर आप देखो, so one could be, let's say, we are doing something called, let's say, um, so front end ही कर रहे हैं, right? So there are, let's say, some engineers, right, who are just building front end. So front end will learn that front end are basically client interfaces through which a user interacts with any application, and does some activity on it, right? That is pretty much there is to it, right? So this is what we call as front end engineering, right? Primarily, of course, when engineers say software engineering, right, they often imply back end engineering, but that is not exactly the case, right? So of course, building front ends, they are building good quality front ends, right? That's not easy, right? And that is what, in fact, I was talking about earlier, right? That finding really high quality software is difficult, right? So backend engineering is also let's say another kind of engineering, right, where we are trying to build backend services, right? So overall there would be a lot of things, right, that we will be doing in hindsight, right, that will not be exposed to the client or the user, but there will be a lot of things that will be happening, let's say in hindsight, and where I might be, let's say, pushing some data to my database, or let's say maybe let's say I am let's say there is a form which a user is submitting on the front end, right, but I need to have an API which can, let's say, take that post request and update my DB, or maybe there's a backend lambda service, right, which I need to trigger, let's say if someone wants to let's say access a particular feature on their application, right? Or it could be, let's say, building a data pipeline in backend, right, where you're collecting raw data somewhere in your data lake, and then you are moving it downstream to, let's say, some of your data warehouse, and you're doing a lot of, let's say, operations on the data. But eventually what I've learned in my time, right, that a lot of, let's say, software engineering, right, especially the backend engineering, is around doing something with data, right? It could be creating a data, right? It could be updating an existing data, right? Or it could be, let's say, deleting some data, or maybe deleting data it could be like a bit, let's say, risky. But overall, a lot of the backend engineering has to deal with data, right? It could be doing some transformation, it could be creating the data, right? So let's say if a user logs into the app, right? So there, let's say a user signs up into the app for the first time, so there would be a new user, a new entry into my table named users, where I'm getting an idea about, okay, this person, okay, this user ID has been created in my table, so I'm creating a data, right, using some service overall, right? The service could be, of course, simple service could be on front end, but the act of, let's say, creating this, generating data, right, let's say in a structured form, or maybe let's say even in unstructured form, a lot of backend engineering will be applied there, right? So this is, of course, another type, right? Then we have let's say hybrid quality of people, right, we call them. So they are also doing something called, let's say, full stack engineering, right? So that means they do a bit of front end, they do a bit of back end, right? But they are not really very experts in back end, they are not like very experts in front end, but now they can build a full stack app, right? A complete app, right, which can solve a particular problem, right? So let's say I want to make, let's say, a hotel booking app, right? So I can design the front end, I can build the front end, I can build a basic back end, I can connect both of them, right? And I have a useful product, right? So this is the power of software engineering, right? Someone also said banks ATM, right? To the previous question, right? So banks and ATM, so ATMs are also running some software, right, on those machines, right? So they are like very specialized software, not maybe you won't be, let's say, you can run JavaScript there as well, but there could be some nuances that we might have to still figure out, right? But and then if you look at some of the other bits, right? So one other thing would be, let's say, doing some sort of, let's say, DevOps, right? DevOps, I think is more or less a part of backend engineering, right? But I'm, of course, giving it a special mention, right? So you're doing a lot of, let's say, operations related to development, right, where you're maintaining your, let's say, code base, your infrastructure, you're seeing you're not getting a lot of issues in, let's say, production. Of course, you should hardly should get any issue in production, but that depends upon teams and their work process, right? So there is also, so there is a lot of, let's say, mobile app engineering as well, right? So where I think the backend maybe, let's say, might be the same, but there is a change in, let's say, the front end, right? Because we'll require some relatively newer front end technologies, right, to build mobile apps, right? So of course this is also a kind of software engineering, right? And it can be a part of, let's say, a full stack or maybe front end engineering, right? Because let's say if I'm trying to build an app, right, where I also have a web app, right, and both of them can share this common backend, but the front end builds could be like pretty different, right? So I might have to write my mobile app in, let's say, React Native, or maybe let's say in Kotlin, or whatever framework that I might use. But the backend might be, let's say, I might be writing my backend, let's say, using Go, or let's say Node.js, or maybe even Python, right? So that can be there, right? So I hope you guys are getting some idea about software engineering, right? So now I think within this, I want to specifically talk about full stack web development. This is more or less, this is the kind of software engineering, right? Which is really focused on building web apps, right? So, so this is the kind of software engineering that is really focused on building the web apps, right? So let's say you're trying to access a website such as AlmaBetter, right? So almabetter.com is a full stack web app, right? So uh, so any piece of software, right, which you build, right, and it is, let's say, a web app, right? So that is what we'll call as a full stack web development, right? So yes, it is a process to create software, but a specific kind of software, right? The ones which you can run or access on browser, you might not be able to, let's say, run them on your, let's say, own local machine. Probably, let's say, if you can build some progressive web apps, then you can do. But the whole idea is we're building applications so that we can access, or anyone can access that on their web browser, right? So it could be their mobile web browser, or let's say a desktop web browser, but overall any web browser. Let's say if any device has a web browser, we can access, let's say, that particular application or site. Okay. So now I want to talk about the roadmap for doing full stack web development, right? So this is what I want to really highlight. So first of all, I think the way we are sort of focusing this, right, is, I'll just change this, right? So we're teaching first of all JavaScript, right? So JavaScript is the language of the web, right? JavaScript is a language, right, which is sort of invented, right, around the idea of events, right? So JavaScript is the language of the web, and that is what we will be using to develop web apps, right? So the first thing is to really spend, let's say, maybe a few weeks trying to understand the core fundamentals of JavaScript, understand how we can implement, let's say, simple data structures, what are their properties, what kind of, let's say, functionalities or methods that we can call on these objects. So overall, get idea about, let's say, basic data structures, right? Which, right, so I'm not talking about, let's say, very advanced data structures such as, let's say, heaps or queues, but I'm talking about, let's say, list or arrays, right, or maybe dictionaries, right? So so get idea about, let's say, or sets even, right? Or so get idea about these basic data structures, see what kind of operations or methods you can call on these, what are their properties, especially in JavaScript. How do you do simple arithmetic? You get some idea about how to, let's say, what kind of inbuilt functions are available in JavaScript that you can use to do some tasks. So all of that overall, right? So you'll also learn how to write functions in JavaScript, right? So that you can achieve a simple or any function, any simple task that you can have on a given input, right? So you should know how to write functions. Um then I think overall, uh, and then I think there you could be doing, let's say, building, you could be, let's say, doing some simple project, right, which could be around testing your, let's say, JavaScript understanding, right? So overall, um, let's say, of course, JavaScript supports prototypal inheritance, right? So there could be, let's say, some of the concepts from OOP as well, right? So how do we, let's say, uh, what are event callbacks, right? So uh, so there are a lot of things that we should be learning in JavaScript if we are really serious about becoming a web developer, right? So event callbacks हो गए, right? So ये सारी चीजें अब promises हो गए, right? So we need to get very basic idea about these concepts, and we'll be able to build a sufficient foundation for JavaScript, right? So this is what I think you should start with, right? Because this is where we'll be using JavaScript for building front end, for building back end. So I think you should like really master this programming language. Okay. Next would be right. The next would be right. Would be focusing on building front end, right? On learning how to build front end technologies. So to build front end, right, what you should really begin with, right, is your understanding of web browser, right, or internet. So first of all, of course, you learn about how internet works, how web browser works, right. So you learn about these technologies just to get an idea how, even though you might know this already because you're using it on daily basis, but just get an idea how internet works, right? Um, eh, because the infrastructure to run today's internet, right, it's pretty complex, right? So it's essentially everything is physically connected, even though we don't feel, right, but essentially everything is physically connected, and without that we wouldn't even have the internet that we think of today, right? Next talk we'll learn about web browsers. So web browsers are basically gateway to the internet. They're a portal to the internet. I can go to a web browser, search in anything, right? Or let's say access a particular site, and we also have access to search engines, so we can search across the internet through, let's say, Google or Bing, or let's say they're like Yandex and whatnot, right? So you get very basic idea, and once now you know this, right, so of course you will be compelled to know about some, HTML and CSS, right? So HTML is basically how we create internet documents, right? So any web document that we create, it's mostly an HTML document. Now so HTML stands for hypertext markup language, right? And you can give a lot of structure, so you can provide, let's say, headings for your, let's say, blogs, or let's say you can have, let's say, bulleted items. You can have, let's say, tables and whatnot, right? Then you can learn about CSS, which is cascading style sheet, and through CSS you can make your HTML pages beautiful, right? So HTML helps us build our web page, right, which is the basic web document, right? And now I can prettify my document by applying really good CSS styles to my document, right? So that is the next thing you should be learning. Then the next thing that you should learn is JS with, let's say, so combining HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, right, to build, let's say, an interactive front end application. So using HTML and CSS, you can build a very static front end, very static. You might not have a lot of interactivity. So I might not be able to, let's say, submit a form using just HTML, CSS. But if I bring in JavaScript, so using that, I can build in a lot of interactivity on my front end, right? So this is where this is what you should be learning next, right? Because as at this point you have already learned JavaScript, so now you need to see how can I uh, uh, accomplish the interplay of these technologies, right? So how can I use HTML, CSS, and JavaScript at the same time, right? So all right. So the next thing is, right. So we'll focus primarily on an important front end technology called React, right? Does anyone know who who invented React? किसी को पता है किसने React बनाया है? अगर वेब डेवलपमेंट जानते हो probably थोड़ा मोड़ा शायद पता होगा. You guys would know maybe. Do you know? So React was invented by Facebook, right? It is it is a really good front end framework, right? Based on top of JavaScript, right? Through which we can build like really good front ends, right? So in fact, I'll give you an idea, right? That our Grow app, right? The platform where you are sort of, let's say, from where you would have joined this particular masterclass, right? So that is a React app. Okay. So you need to learn a bit about React. You need to learn about hooks. So there are a lot of React hooks that you should use, right? And and then once you have got a basic understanding, so maybe you can also learn a bit about Next.js, right? So Next.js is also an important emerging technology, and in fact our website is built in Next.js, but our, let's say, the student platform is built in React, right? So Next.js provides additional functionalities or additional capabilities on top of React. So applications in Next are like really SEO friendly. We can do a lot of server side rendering, and there's a lot of kind of ways in which you can sort of generate content on your web page, right? So it could be, let's say, static generation, or it could be incremental static generation, but there are a lot of ways in which we can do this, right? So there could be some web pages which are getting rendered through server side rendering, but there could be some pages on which we are using static generation. So there's a lot of flexibility that you can build in your website. And so let's say there is a web page in which on which the information is constantly changing. Let's say it's getting updated on daily basis, right? So it makes sense that you deliver the content through, let's say, server side rendering. So you don't have to build let's say your app every now and then, right? So this is more or less about front end, right? So this is what you need to really focus on, right? Preetham, you have no clue what's happening. What do you think are we doing? Okay, are you getting some idea? Can you tell me? Are you getting some idea? As in, what is even happening? Okay. All right. So overall, we are discussing the roadmap for becoming, let's say, or doing, let's say, full stack web development. This is what we are doing, right? So our roadmap starts with learning JavaScript. Then we need to go ahead and learn about front end, right? So so I think this is where I think you'll also get idea about, let's say, other technologies. Let's say, so you can use Tailwind for CSS, right? So Tailwind ho gaya aapka, right? You learn about, let's say, something called npm, right? So npm is the node package manager, through which, let's say, you can install a lot of, let's say, available packages in JavaScript, right? And all right. And I think this would be also a good time to introduce you to the idea of Git, and then, of course, the platform GitHub, right? So Git is a technology for version control system. This is how we make sure, right? How can, let's say, a group of people who can work together, let's say, on single software, and they can work independently, and how can they, let's say, merge their code with each other, and how do they control the versions of their code, right? Because with time my code will always get updated, so I need to have a really great mechanism through which I can achieve all of this, right? So this is where we'll need to learn about Git as a technology. Okay. So so now at this point it would be really great, I think, if you guys do a simple front end project, right? So if you do a simple front end project here at this point, so you'll be able to assimilate everything that you have learned so far, right? You can, so for backend, you don't need to focus on backend, so maybe you can use some API to get the data, or maybe, let's say, you can have some dummy data as well. So but the idea is you should be able to, let's say, build a good front end app at this point of time, right? So this could be, let's say, your project. So you should be able to build a simple front end app. We don't have to bother about, let's say, the data. We can get the data, let's say, via through some public API, or maybe the data can be hard coded, or, let's say, or dummy. But you don't have to worry about, let's say, how the data is exactly going to be there, right? Or are we even planning to show all the data, right? So we are here more or less focused on building the required functionalities on our front end, right? How can I build a really good web app, right? At least the front end part of it. So this is what you need to learn next. So the next would be, we go back to backend, right? So we go to backend module, right? And here we try to learn some of the ideas in backend engineering, right? So what we will start with, right? So we'll start with, right, Node.js and Express, right? So basically, Express.js is a framework, right, through which we can, let's say, do build backend services in JavaScript or with JavaScript, and then Node is more or less a runtime, right? Uh, so overall, how did we even get to Node? So initially, JavaScript was meant to run only on browser, right? But people figured out, right, that they can run Node on a particular server as well, right? So Node is just a runtime, right? And in backend, you'll need to learn about how to write, let's say, Node APIs, and using the express framework, right? So overall, this is what you'll need to begin with, right? So APIs ko of course idea आप लोगों को होना चाहिए by this point. What are APIs? So APIs, the API is an acronym for application programming interface. They are essentially the medium of communication between your front end interface and your backend services, right? So they carry data from the backend to the front end, or front end to the backend, and this is what they keep doing, right, all the time. So we need to learn about what are APIs, and and then of course we need to think about, learn about, let's say, RESTful APIs specifically, right? So I will just highlight this. So we need to learn about RESTful APIs primarily, right? So this is what we need to really do, right? So RESTful, you learn about when the time comes. What is a REST framework? So it stands for something called representational state transfer, but we don't have to really worry about that, right? But it is, let's say, some sort of API through which we can send information over HTTP. Okay. Uh, then I think so. Once we now know how to just write a simple backend service using Node and Express, we know how to write APIs, right? So then I think we can learn about, let's say, database, right? So we can learn about database, and a good a good start would be to learn about SQL database, right? So you can use something called, let's say, PostgreSQL, right? So you can learn this, or maybe and let's say in non and in no relational databases, you can maybe learn about MongoDB, or some other databases, right? But overall, getting a good idea of, let's say, SQL database or relational database is, I think, good enough, right? So JavaScript is, yes, enough for front end. Of course, with that you need to have a good understanding of the Devanshu, good understanding of HTML, CSS, and then and then of course you need to learn about do some React as well. Okay. So explain a little bit more about API. So guys, so let me just give you an example, right? So let me just go ahead and share my screen, right? And let's do something, right? So right, so let's say if I access a website, right, so which is almabetter.com, right, for example. So now I can go to the inspect, right, and I can go to something called network, right, and there is something called fetch or xhr, right? So let's see. So we are saying showing a lot of, let's say, data on our website, right? We have to carry a lot of data from somewhere, right, so that we can display those on the website. So now you can see that here we have, let's say, an API, right? You can see this, right? So this is an API, right, through which we are getting data from our CMS, which is on Strapi, right? And this, we are getting this on front end, right? So overall, APIs will enable us to move data here and there, right? So they are like a medium of exchange. So as a user, what did I do? I didn't have to worry about API and all, right? I wanted to access almabetter.com. Almabetter.com would have some content. How that content is stored somewhere, right? On their some database. So now APIs will sort of, when I'm trying to access this, API will basically get that information for me, and I'm able to let's say see that, right? Now let's say I can also send some information from my end to let's say AlmaBetter, right? So for example, I can fill out this particular form, right? So I can fill out this form, right? And it we can do a post API request, and there will be, let's say, we'll be able to update our database in backend with this information, right? So overall, APIs essentially they carry information over the internet, right? APIs carry information over the internet. They are the backbone of the modern internet, right? Without APIs, we cannot even fathom, right, how internet would be. All right, Akshay, are you getting this? Okay, that's great. So I think, yeah, let's come back to this. I'll just share my screen again. All right. So डेटाबेस में अब थोड़ा पोस्टग्रे सीक्वल मोंगोडीबी ये सब सीख लेंगे, राइट? सो आई थिंक वो, वेट अ सेकंड। सो अब और क्या हमें सीखना पड़ेगा बैकएंड में, राइट? बिकॉज वी आर इन बैक, अभी डेटाबेस आई थिंक थोड़ा हमने सीख लिया, राइट? सो नाउ आई थिंक there are few things that we should like really get our heads around, right? So the next ideas would be, right? So the next ideas would be to learn about, let's say, authentication, right? So authentication के बारे में आप थोड़ा सीख लो, right? So authentication and authorization, तो ये कैसे करते हैं, right? So that let's say your apps are like well protected. Let's say non-authorized users cannot access your web, let's say, web application. So we need to learn about how do we build, and right, and there could be like some frameworks for doing this. It could be, let's say, JWT, right, which is a common, let's say, authentication framework, right? You can learn about SSO as well, right? So ये सब आप सीख सकते हो इसके around. And so this is what you can do around authentication, right? Next would be, let's say, you can learn a bit about other important technology which I know is Redis, right? So Redis is um, a cache service. It's also a data store, right? So it's pretty flexible and it's pretty powerful, right? So इसके बारे में आप थोड़ा पढ़ सकते हो कि Redis क्या होता है, right? कि so how can you, let's say, cache, let's say, very frequently requested information, so that you are not spending a lot of, let's say, time and let's say resources in delivering that content. Okay, so वो कर सकते हो। Redis पे आप database भी अपना बना सकते हो, right? So it has a lot of flexibility, so maybe you can read about this when you are doing backend, right? So now I think the next thing we want to really learn is, I will go to the next frame, right? Is learning a bit of DevOps, right? So I know if, even without it you can do, right? But I think you should know a bit of DevOps, right? So थोड़ा मोड़ा DevOps क्या क्या चाहिए होगा? So you should have a good idea of, let's say, Linux, right? So Linux systems पे कैसे आप how can you, let's say, execute your task or do your task? So you should have good understanding of, let's say, Linux and fundamentals. All right. Then I think, because most of these days, right, people are not building their own physical infrastructure. They're essentially building hosting their services on cloud, right? So having good idea about, let's say, some cloud providers, right? Or so cloud technology platform is very important. So you can, I think, learn about AWS. So AWS is a very important, let's say, I think it is the most popular cloud platform that is out there in the world, right? So in fact we are using AWS. We're also using Azure, which is the cloud platform by Microsoft. And then some companies also use GCP, which is from Google again, that is short for Google Cloud Platform. So now in AWS, so let's say, of course, if you know AWS, you can totally do Azure or GCP, right? There's no hardly any difference. You can transfer your learning altogether, but you need to have at least idea on a particular cloud platform. What are the services that you can do, and what are the tasks that you can achieve? Okay. तो अब AWS में क्या क्या सीख सकते हैं, राइट? व्हाट आर द सर्विसेज? यू गाइस माइट नो अबाउट देम, बट मैं आपको बताता हूँ। सो AWS में सबसे सिंपल, सबसे द मोस्ट, लेट्स से, कॉमन वन वुड बी, लेट्स से, अगर आप देखो, सॉरी, आई विल जस्ट या डिलीट दिस। सो आप लेट्स से EC2, right? So EC2 is for Elastic Cloud Compute, and basically EC2 will give you access to, let's say, simple machines where you can run any piece of code, right? So or any program. So EC2 आपको थोड़ा आइडिया होना चाहिए, उस आपको थोड़ा आइडिया होना चाहिए, let's say, कि अवेलेबिलिटी जोन्स क्या होते हैं, because there is a particular way in which you are going to deploy your infrastructure. So availability zones kya hote hain? So if you think about, let's say, AWS, right? So they have availability zones across the entire globe, right? So India mein kahin kahin pe hai, right? So let's say in Hyderabad, in Bangalore, let's say in Mumbai, they would have, let's say, in Europe in multiple places, in US in multiple places, in Australia, in Singapore. So overall बहुत जगह availability zones है. And then within these availability zones you can think about building your virtual private cloud, right? This is where all your services can reside, right? So that it's protected from the external world. So you can build, let's say, a virtual private cloud. तो इसके बारे में थोड़ा पढ़ सकते हो. And then we have a range of services, right? Can you guys tell me if you know of any service which is available on AWS? So एक आपको पता होगा maybe S3, right? Sorry. So S3 is for simple storage service. So this is where we can store, let's say, any file whatsoever in AWS, right? So S3 is just a storage. Azure में similarly blob storage आपको मिलेगा. So this is one service. और भी बहुत सारे common है. There is, let's say, the DNS service which is called Route 53, right? So let's say if you want to host any domain, right, on AWS, so you can use Route 53. बहुत सारे और भी है. Let's say lambda है. So there is a lambda. You can write serverless functions, execute serverless functions using lambda. बहुत important technology एक और मैं बताता हूँ, which is, let's say, CloudFront, right? So CloudFront is the CDN. You guys know what is CDN is? So CDN is short for Content Delivery Network, right? So AWS CloudFront, it is, let's say, an edge server which really which serves content really fast, right? So ये कैश करके somehow रखते हैं edge servers पे, and then आपको content deliver करता है. It could be, let's say, images or whatever that you have already seen. So CloudFront is a very important technology, right? It is what we call as a CDN. Then I think और बहुत सारे हैं, right? बहुत सारे what we also use something called RDS, right? So this is a SQL database available in AWS, right? So it's a SQL database service. Then you have SQS, SNS, you have, let's say, Kinesis, right? EKS. So you can run, let's say, your Kubernetes clusters using EKS, right? So डॉकर वॉकर चला सकते हो. ये सब थोड़ा डॉकर वॉकर का भी आइडिया आई थिंक आप लोग को होना चाहिए, ठीक है? थोड़ा मोड़ा एटलीस्ट एक बेसिक अंडरस्टैंडिंग होनी चाहिए, राइट? आई एम नॉट एक्सपेक्टिंग दैट यू गाइज विल be able to master a lot of things, but should know about Docker technologies so that, let's say, you can host your infrastructure in a relatively scalable way, right? So ये आपको आना चाहिए, I think, right? So monitoring में I think थोड़ा monitoring आना चाहिए. So monitoring के लिए maybe you can use a lot of, let's say, log tools. So जैसे Sentry use कर सकते हो आप लोग, right? There is also a Cloud Watch by AWS, right? So you can use Cloud Watch. तो ये सब आप कर सकते हो, right? So these are the things that you can do around monitoring, right? So you can monitor and see if you are getting any prod issue or not, right? What is happening? What kind of errors are we seeing, right? What are the what do the logs say, right? So there could be a lot of cases in which we want to go into these logs and see what really happened, right? So monitoring I think आना चाहिए थोड़ा मोड़ा, ठीक है? Sentry में आप कैसे log कर सकते हो? So you can, let's say, import some library from Sentry, and let's say based on a particular event you can push that let's say information on that particular event into Sentry, and Sentry serves as a good platform, right, where you can monitor a lot of, let's say, issues, right, or bugs that you can be getting in any environment. Might not, so not only, let's say, in prod, but let's say even in your dev and QA. Okay. Then I think one important other thing that I feel you guys should know is basically the CI/CD pipeline. Okay, so CI/CD pipeline thoda pata hona chahiye, right? This is achieved through, so let's say how we do this. So you do this through, let's say, GitHub Actions. So AlmaBetter में हम लोग GitHub Actions use करते हैं. So overall, what happens, right? So let's say I have pushed my code to the dev branch, right? So dev branch में मैंने अपना code push कर दिया, merge हो गया वो, let's say, right, वहाँ पे. So now as soon as it is merged, I have a GitHub action, right, which basically is a specified instruction, right? So once this updated code is available, you create, these are the code through which you will create a new build, right? So it automatically create, let's say if I'm doing a change on my front end code base, so it can automatically build, let's say, the front end as soon as my code is merged into my dev branch, right? So um, that will that build will automatically get done, and it will be deployed as well, right? So, and it takes, let's say, depending on simple apps, it can take, let's say, 5 to 10 minutes, right? But um, so we don't have to really worry about a lot of things, right? So you can build this continuous integration and continuous deployment pipeline, okay, using GitHub Actions. There are other tools as well, like, let's say, I think probably Ansible. I think but we are using Actions, right? GitHub Actions has been like pretty simple to use. So I think this is what we have been using. All right. I think or thoda moda, I think the last of the things that you should get an idea is basically some idea about, let's say, scalability, right? So scalability के बारे में थोड़ा आइडिया आप ले सकते हो कि कैसे बना सकते हैं, how can we make scalable web apps. Availability भी एक चीज होती है, right? So your app is available almost all the time. There is no downtime. So वो सारी चीजें, I think these are like core principles, right? Which any software, any good product should abide by, right? So let's say if you see a really large influx of users, so your application should be designed in such a way that it can scale flexibly, right? So maybe um, you bring in more hardware, right? And you can run your scripts there, or you do some sort of, let's say, either vertical or horizontal scaling, right? But so of course you can do a hybrid of them as well, and this is what usually companies do. So they do not just just scale horizontally or vertically completely, but there could be, let's say, a bit of the a hybrid of the two approaches. So ये सारी चीजें आप लोग को थोड़ी पता होनी चाहिए, right? This is what I would say, um, that this should be part of your roadmap. Okay. So आई थिंक एम आई लीविंग एनीथिंग, कुछ और छूट रहा है, कुछ ऐसे चीजें जो आई थिंक यू गाइज शुड नो, बट आई थिंक आई हैवंट टॉक्ड अबाउट. Probably there could be like a few other technologies, like जैसे मान लो आई थिंक अदर टेक्नोलॉजीज में मैं अगर दिखाऊं आपको अदर टेक्नोलॉजीज, सो एक हो सकता है, लेट्स से कि यू कैन हैव एन आइडिया अबाउट, लेट्स से, वेब सॉकेट्स, राइट? सो वेब सॉकेट्स का आइडिया हो सकता है, सॉरी व्हाट इज हैपनिंग, ओके. सो वेब सॉकेट्स का आइडिया आप ले लोगे तो उससे क्या होगा, यू कैन बिल्ड, लेट्स से, अ रियली गुड चैट ऐप, और भी ऐसे सर्विसेज है जहां पे एक सॉकेट कनेक्शन रिक्वायर्ड है, सो यू कैन हैव persistent, let's say, connection overall, right? Because if I do normal, let's say, an http request, right, that is stateless, right? So once I have gotten the request, so now everything sort of, let's say, restarts in a way, right? But web socket connections, they persist overall. So let's say if I'm chatting over, let's say, WhatsApp, right? So I'm almost instantaneously getting the messages delivered to and fro. Okay. So ये थोड़ा पढ़ सकते हो, आई थिंक थोड़ा मोड़ा नेटवर्किंग के बारे में और पढ़ सकते हो. यू के गाइज कैन रीड अबाउट नेटवर्किंग ओवरऑल, और नेटवर्किंग कैसे होती है, राइट? यू कैन लर्न अबाउट सम अदर प्रोटोकॉल्स लाइक GRPC पढ़ सकते हो, राइट? सो HLS हो गया, राइट? HLS protocol, ये सब के बारे में आप, maybe you guys can read about these protocols as well, right? Of course it's not expected, but if you are curious you can learn about these, right? But this is more or less what we want to do. Of course there's so many other things that we can do, right? So अगर databases में और भी कुछ पढ़ना है तो GraphQL पढ़ सकते हो, right? Cassandra पढ़ सकते हो, बहुत सारे ऐसे DB आ गए, right? Firebase है, right? स्काला है, क्या क्या नहीं है. सो देयर सो मेनी टेक्नोलॉजीज डेटाबेस के ही अंदर, राइट? दैट इज इन सेल्फ अ वेरी बिग यूनिवर्स, राइट? बहुत सारी और भी चीजें हैं. फॉरवर्ड प्रॉक्सी, रिवर्स प्रॉक्सी, ऐसे कॉन्सेप्ट्स आपको चाहिए. सो बैकएंड में वो सारे मतलब आपको पढ़ाए जाएंगे, राइट? सो यू लर्न एंड यू कैन yeah, also figure out on your own. So but these are more or less the concepts that you'd need to get started as, let's say, a full stack software developer. So you should be good, let's say, on front end. You should also be good at back end as well, right? But let's say if you don't want to do a lot of backend, you can always, let's say, evolve yourself into a, let's say, front end heavy role, right? So you can learn more things in front end. So that can suit, let's say, your expectations. Or probably, let's say, if you're not interested in front end, you want to just do back end, so maybe you can do a lot of other advanced stuff in back end to let's say, get a back end heavy role, right? But this roadmap is more or less for a balanced developer perspective, right? What we have to do for security. So security ke liye, I think overall backend mein you'll be taught some practices. But I think simple, I think alag alag type ke security layers hai, right? So सिक्योरिटी में भी बहुत सारे कैसे जो अटैक्स हो सकते हैं, मान लो कि डीडोस अटैक्स हो सकते हैं, या कुछ दूसरे टाइप के वल्नरेबिलिटीज है. सो दोज विल बी, आई थिंक, डिस्कस टुवर्ड्स द एंड, राइट? सो विच विल आल्सो, it's not a very dedicated topic, but there will be a lecture on how to, let's say, build secure web apps, right? So कैसे attacks prevent कर सकते हो, what are the best practices you can use, so that let's say you're not, let's say you're tokenizing sensitive information. आपके, let's say, APIs are secure, so your API designs have to be also secure, right? So security is not just let's say, an extra thing. It is basically, it is sort of diffused throughout your entire development, right? So you have to make sure everything, your database has to be secure. That is why even will think, let's say, bother about building, let's say, a VPC, right? You have to build like really secure APIs, right? You might need to have a infrastructure so that you can, let's say, deal with some DDoS attacks, right? Depend So because they can do some sort of, let's say, SQL injection as well, right? So अलग अलग टाइप के हो सकते हैं. I think you should get some idea. So maybe I should write this as well, right? So some ideas about, let's say, security principles. Okay. So थोड़ा आइडिया इसका ले सकते हो. आई थिंक अ गुड पॉइंट, अक्षय, फ्रॉम योर एंड, राइट? ओके. ओके. सो आई थिंक एक और इम्पॉर्टेंट टॉपिक है विच आई फॉरगॉट, राइट, विच इज टेस्टिंग, राइट? सो टेस्टिंग बहुत लेट्स से अंडररेटेड है, बट आई थिंक यू गाइस शुड do a lot of testing, right? It could be unit testing, integration testing, regression testing करनी है. I think developers should know how to, let's say, test as well. Because often what they will do, that they will outsource this to the QA guys, right? But I think really good developers, right, they write a lot of test cases themselves, and they do some sort of advanced testing as well. So this is what I think you should also build in your, let's say, armory. Okay. Cool, guys. Okay. So I think we pretty much know the roadmap, right? So now I think we want to really focus on, right, the next thing, which is the job roles and skills required, right? So the roadmap, of course, highlights a lot of skills that we'll need. But overall, let's try to have a look, right? So let's try to have a look at some of the job openings that we regularly see on the internet, right? Okay. So let's say I go to my grow.almabetter.com. Okay. So now you can see a job board here. So let's say, and I want to, let's say, filter on the web development jobs, right? So I want to have a look at what are the expectations of these companies, right? So if they're hiring for, let's say, so Tribo Hotels is a good company. They're hiring for intern. Okay. IBM. Okay. So IBM is also hiring for, let's say, full stack developer, right? So let's go ahead and look at the JD for this, right? So इसके JD में देख सकते हैं, हम लोग अप्लाई भी कर सकते हैं. We can, राइट? सो इसका JD देखते हैं क्या है. right? So ये क्या बोल रहा है कि as an application developer you will lead IBM into the future by translating system requirements into the design and development. Okay, so right. So of course here they are asking for a lot of experience, right? But this depends from company to company, right? This might be a senior role, but they have not specified, they have of course specified that they are hiring for let's say a senior role, but a lot of, let's say, companies would be happy to, let's say, also take freshers, right? So freshers भी हो ले सकते हैं, but थोड़ा आइडिया होना चाहिए. तो क्या क्या, तो स्ट्रॉन्ग C++ गोलैंग प्रोग्रामिंग स्किल्स, राइट? सो अगर बैकएंड आता है, मान लो आप गो सीख सकते हो, राइट? सो लेट्स से ऑफ कोर्स you would learn, let's say, node, okay? But if you know the ideas of backend engineering, right? So now writing those services or expressing your thoughts in another language should not be a problem, right? So let's say even if they're asking, let's say, some other language, it's not that difficult to sort of know, right? Especially today with the help of chat gpt and all, you can read somewhere, okay? Proficiency with Java is added advantage, right? So they're expecting कि कुछ एक object oriented language भी कुछ आपके पास हो तो सही रहेगा, right? Highly proficient in React, Node, HTML, CSS. तो इनको सब चाहिए. इनको चाहिए कि भाई React, Node भी कर ले, Java भी कर ले, सब कर ले, right? And this is what companies do, right? They sort of overstate their even requirements, right? They always overstate. They want almost every the candidate to have almost everything, right? But what I'm saying that this is the most important thing. If you know, let's say, if you can learn any of these languages, let's say, so that is good. And then you should have good idea about cloud architecture, microservices, OCP, right? So AWS, Docker, Kubernetes, right? So microservices होंगे, serverless हो गया, right? So ये सारी चीजों के बारे में थोड़ा idea होना चाहिए, which I already discussed, let's say, in the backend and DevOps part, right? Working knowledge of agile tools, right? So because you're going to work together in a team, right? So agile technologies का थोड़ा idea होना चाहिए. जीरा हो गया, right? और कुछ कुछ चीजें हो गई. और then um, strong problem solving skills, right? So of course aptitude तो अच्छा होना चाहिए, right? This is what they are expecting. So देखो, और भी कुछ नहीं, इतना ही है. So ऐसा नहीं है. So of course एक नया चीज देखा कि ये experience चाहिए. Let's go ahead and look at maybe, let's say, some other requirement. So let's say एक बार फिर से मैं filter कर लेता हूँ. Maybe let's do one thing. मैं quickly यहाँ पे, so full stack web developer jobs, right? So let me just search in Google, right? So I will go to, let's say, Google jobs, and maybe you can find, like, let's say, let's look at this company called Coffee Beans, right? So 2 दिन पहले ही आया है ये. इनको अभी 5 साल. कोई देखते एक्सपीरियंस फ्रेशर, एक बार देख लेते हैं, कोई ना कोई तो होगा, राइट? सो एक बार ऐसा डाल देते हैं, जूनियर, लेट्स से, राइट? So let's look at maybe, let's say, Sara. ये क्या कर रहा है? Sara में they are not asking for a lot of experience, but what are the roles and responsibilities that they are expecting? So collaborate with functional teams, develop both front end and back end components using Python, React, and Node.js. So React and Node आता है, Python भी कर लोगे, right? So maybe Node में ही कर लो, कोई issue नहीं है. Write efficient, reusable, and scalable code. So of course you'll be learning the principles. Ensure the responsiveness and performance of applications. So let's say you of course, when you're learning front end, you will be learning how to, let's say, build responsive front end apps. And then of course performance कैसे optimize कर सकते हैं, तो ये सब आप और सीखोगे, right? So I think this is what we have already discussed, right? Nothing new. Integrate third party APIs and services. So let's say third party APIs integrate करना है, वो भी easy है, right? Troubleshoot and debug issues to optimize performance and enhance user experience. Okay, so you would already know this. Stay updated with the latest trends and technologies, right? So क्या क्या आना चाहिए थोड़ा. So देखो, ये हो गया proficiency in virtual control system, JavaScript आना चाहिए, HTML, CSS and Tailwind ये सब आना चाहिए, agile development and problem solving, right? So you guys are seeing that they are not expecting a lot, right? expectation is not like really through the roof. So maybe we can go to some other, let's say, company. So let's look at some other company. So कुछ और कंपनी देखते हैं, बहुत सारी कंपनीज आ रही है. Right, so let's say Kearney में, right? So what they are expecting, so देखो, so 3+ years of experience. So experience, अगर let's say working experience है, then still it will work, right? Even though you might not have, let's say, direct experience of these technologies, but this is not very hard and fast, right? It's not, let's say, guaranteed that they're only going to hire these guys. Of course इनका objective ये होता है कि भाई, if I don't write 3+, then I'm going to, let's say, get, let's say, tons of applications. So this is how recruiters think, that hey, I will just put this filter, so automatically not a lot of people will apply. But even though they can hire actually, let's say, someone with 1 to 2 years of experience if they have good pedigree. Okay, so अभी ये देखो, Azure या AWS का आइडिया होना चाहिए, एंड टू एंड डेवलपमेंट आना चाहिए, राइट? सो ऑथेंटिकेशन के बारे में आइडिया होना चाहिए, राइट? एपीआई गेटवे है, लेट्स से AWS में, उसकी उसका आइडिया होना चाहिए, राइट? रेस्ट एपीआईज हो गए, एचटीटीपी रिक्वेस्ट हो गए, राइट? देन सो जावास्क्रिप्ट हो गया ओवरऑल, राइट? सो CICD यहाँ पे दिख रहा है कुछ मुझे, राइट? और क्या है, डेटाबेस की कुछ चीज़ें आनी चाहिए, राइट? हाउ टू मेक, लेट्स से, अवेलेबल एंड, लेट्स से, रेजिलिएंट एप्लीकेशंस. सो ये सारी चीज़ें हो गई. रेडिस का आइडिया होना चाहिए यहाँ पे, राइट? सो आई थिंक व्हाट आई हैव डिस्कस्ड इन द रोड मैप, राइट, आई थिंक दैट्स प्रीटी मच व्हाट दे आर आल्सो एक्सपेक्टिंग, राइट? बट बिकॉज उसके अलावा और क्या ही आपको पूछेंगे, राइट? What will they expect, right, apart from this? Okay, so I think what we can do is we can go ahead and discuss some, let's say, some of the common interview questions that companies might ask, right? So common interview questions क्या क्या पूछ सकती है companies, right? So वो एक बार देख लेते हैं, right? So let's look at interview questions basically, right? सो क्या क्या इंटरव्यू क्वेश्चंस कंपनी पूछ सकती है, राइट? सो वो समझते हैं ओवरऑल, राइट? सो सिंपल क्वेश्चन, जैसे जावास्क्रिप्ट में दे कैन गिव यू, लेट्स से, सिंपल प्रोग्राम, लेट्स से, सॉल्व अ सिंपल प्रॉब्लम इन जावास्क्रिप्ट, राइट? सॉल्व अ प्रॉब्लम, लेट्स से, in JS. So this could be, let's say, some DSA problems, very simple DSA problem. It can be asked, let's say, and you might be required to code that in JavaScript. Okay. ऐसे करके बहुत सारे अब हो सकते हैं कि implement a function to reverse a linked list, right? And कुछ ना कुछ ऐसे चीजें आपके पास पूछी जा सकती है, right? Next would be, right? So ये सारे problem solving skills के बाद अगर if you look at the technical questions, right? So they might ask you कि, let's say, HTTP और HTTPS में क्या difference है, right? So what is the difference between, let's say, HTTP versus HTTPS, right? So what is HTTP secured? क्या difference है? What are the extra things, right? RESTful APIs क्या होते हैं, right? So this is also a popular question that a lot of, let's say, interviewers ask to developers, right? फिर वो पूछ सकते हैं कि, let's say सर्वर साइड रेंडरिंग वर्सेस क्लाइंट साइड रेंडरिंग, राइट? में क्या डिफरेंस है, राइट? सो ये क्वेश्चन हो सकता है, राइट? सो दिस इज, लेट्स से, वन ऑफ द क्वेश्चन दैट दे कैन आस्क. वो फिर पूछ सकते हैं कि हाउ, लेट्स से, दे विल से show you the web app, right? And they will ask you, how can you tell me what are the areas through which I can improve the performance of this application? So let's say एक API का performance improve करना है, right? So how to improve the performance of an API, right? So let's say if an API is taking around, let's say, 500 milliseconds to get a response, how can I get this to, let's say, work within 100 milliseconds, given some constraints, given some, of course, some things which are through which we can, this should be possible, right? So ये questions पूछे जा सकते हैं. And then I think और भी हो सकते हैं बहुत सारी चीजें, right? कि इवेंट, सॉरी, कॉलबैक्स क्या होते हैं, इवेंट लूप्स क्या होते हैं जावास्क्रिप्ट में, राइट? सो दे आर गोइंग टू, लेट्स से, दे कैन आस्क दीज क्वेश्चंस एज वेल. सो जो जावास्क्रिप्ट पे या रिएक्ट पे हो सकता है, रिएक्ट में हुक्स के बारे में पूछ सकते हैं कि व्हाट आर हुक्स इन रिएक्ट, राइट? हाउ डू वी डू स्टेट मैनेजमेंट इन रिएक्ट, राइट? रीडक्स में भी थोड़ा पढ़ सकते हो, राइट? सो रीडक्स के बारे में थोड़ा पढ़ सकते हो गाइज आप लोग, राइट? सो these questions can be asked, right? So how can you build a reducer overall, right? फिर आई थिंक यही सब क्वेश्चंस है. बैकएंड के बारे में पूछ सकते हैं कि डेटाबेस में लेट्स से व्हाट इज द कैप थियरम, राइट? कि व्हाट इज कंसिस्टेंसी, अवेलेबिलिटी एंड परसिस्टेंसी, राइट? सो ये सब क्वेश्चंस भी पूछे जा सकते हैं, राइट? बिकॉज बैकएंड में और भी बहुत सारे क्वेश्चंस है दैट कैन बी आस्क्ड, राइट? दे कैन आस्क यू अबाउट व्हाट इज, लेट्स से, सर्वरलेस, राइट? व्हाट इज so less about serverless, right? So serverless is not, let's say, devoid of servers. It's just somebody else's server. So serverless के बारे में पूछ सकते हैं. They can ask you about, let's say, some database questions as well, right? So जैसे मैंने आपको बोला, for example, they can ask you, right, कि let's say I want to design, let's say, a YouTube like system, right? So system design का मान लो question है, उसी का एक component पूछ सकते हैं कि let's say they are not asking you to do the entire system design, but at least database design कर सकते हो. Can you design what kind of tables would I need for this service? What would be the schema of these tables? What would be the primary key, as in index क्या होगा, foreign keys क्या होंगे? So there might be questions on these as well, right? So write down, let's say, so write schema for, let's say, some database design for any system, right? So let's say it could be for YouTube, let's say, right? So something like this. So ऐसे करके interview questions you can be asked totally, right? So and then I think that is pretty much, at least with respect to the technical questions. Of course they are going to probe you, let's say, your aptitude in a different way, or maybe, let's say, your behavior. But this is what that there is to it. Okay, so I think let's quickly go back to our, let's say, grow platform. I'll just quickly show you the curriculum, let's say, for the web development, uh, right? So web development curriculum एक बार आप लोग quickly देख लो, एक hang on. So it starts, so there are like total of 5 modules. The module 1 is really focused on building, let's say, your knowledge about JavaScript. So we start with, let's say, basics of internet and web. You get some idea about Git, GitHub, VS Code IDE, right? CLI. And then we teach you JavaScript, right? So arrays in JavaScript, how do you run loops and iterations? And then functional programming, let's say, what is ES, right? And or भी other concepts, right? So asynchronous के basics हो गए, right? So ये आप, this is what you're going to learn in module 1. Okay, then the next module is basically design and analysis of algorithms, right? So data structures का थोड़ा basic, right? So like DSA, recursion हो गया, stacks and queues, sorting and searching techniques, linked list. So very basic idea of, let's say, some advanced algorithms and advanced data structures. Okay, then module 3 is on front end development, right? So you're going to learn about, let's say, HTML and CSS first of all. Then how do we use JavaScript alongside them? um, and then we'll learn about React, right? And then advanced React, right? So this is where you're going to learn about hooks and redux and all, right? Last, fourth module is on backend development. So you'll start with learning about databases. So how to do CRUD operations in your database. So you learn relational databases first, then we jump onto non-relational databases, and then in the last chapter you learn about, let's say, Node.js and Express.js, right? And you guys can explore the curriculum. So let's say this is a particular lesson. You can just click on this and you can uh, explore a lot of things, right? In a single lesson you will have a concept activity, a video, and a quiz and a coding assessment as well. And you can access the entire module from a single place as well, right? So, right, and there is also an ID which we have built. So you can run your JavaScript code as well in our ID. Okay, then right, so this is all about backend. So you learn about Express and all, right? um, Then in module 5 you'll learn about basics of practical software engineering, right, which is some bits of the DevOps, right? So you learn about AWS basics. So AWS के infrastructure थोड़ा समझेंगे, and then you will be implementing, let's say, industry grade project, right, on cloud, where you'll be using some services from AWS, right, and then you will be building, let's say, full front end, full back end, all by yourself, right? So this is what module 5. So I think there will be some other topics as well in this particular module, probably not listed as of now, but there will be some other advanced concepts too. Okay, so this is what I think the curriculum looks like, guys. um, what did we want to discuss else, right? So now I think I'm open to sort of taking up questions, if you guys have in the Q&A. So कुछ question है तो बताओ, I can answer those for now. So I hope everyone is clear with the dashboard. At least curriculum आपको clear है. आपके classes यहाँ पे आपको दिखेंगे completed अगर classes है, so they appear here. You can view your recording and all, right? Yeah. So, and your classes will happen on this AirMeet platform only, right? Where we are connected as of now. You have a lot of things to practice. So there are coding problems, a lot of coding problems. You have some supplementary courses, coding assessments. So some supplementary courses on blockchain as well that we are provided. So you can see blockchain overview, Solidity, Hyperledger, and practical implementation. So you can maybe build a D app, let's say, as well. Some coding assessments. So these are company-wise coding assessments that you have available on your dashboard. We'll be adding a lot of them, and then a lot of quiz assessments as well. You can see all your projects here, as in what kind of projects that you can find. So we have also created really good Figma files for, let's say, your front end apps, right? So at least you like building what is there, right? सो आप देख सकते हो सारा कैसे प्रोजेक्ट होता है, क्या आपको सबमिट करना है, हाउ विल इट बी इवैल्यूएटेड, व्हाट आर द rubrics, so everything that you can see. Okay, then the career will give you some idea about. You can also do a mentorship, right? If you're enrolled with us, you can do a mentorship, let's say, with one of our mentors, and get some guidance from them. You can I've already shown you the job board, right? You can see all the jobs which are being posted. If you want to look at internships or for, let's say, web development, you can go through them, right? Or let's say full time or any, so you can just apply those filter. Let's say if you are finding it interesting and you want to refer your friends to our course, so you can use refer and earn. But overall, that is what there is. There's also a leaderboard that you can see, cohort leaderboard, so you can see if you are doing well enough in your cohort. So that is it. All right. So अब बताओ क्या questions है guys, आपके बताओ, so we can take those questions. Right. Please share your questions over the chat if you have any. So I think I'll be sharing this. I'll just share this Jamboard as well with everyone. Uh, okay. So I think who else? So Navneet, I think if you want to discuss something else, which I might not have been able to, so you can go ahead and share. Okay. So I'll just share the link to the Jamboard, right? So you guys can just go through what we discussed in this masterclass. I think Navneet, you are on the stage. Do you want to yeah, share anything else, Navneet, or is this enough?
Yeah, I have something to share with the
Okay, sure, sure.
guidance
Please
present
go
over
ahead.
here.
Yeah,
Very
yeah.
good afternoon, sir. I hope you are doing well. So, hi guys, hello everyone. So, me Navneet over here, senior academic counselor with you all. So, I would be taking some questions and all. Basically, I want to share a presentation. Lot of you have already covered up, sir, in the particular presentation of yours. So, I'm gonna showcase some more information that how basically our program looks like, how it's gonna help the candidates present over here. At the
Mm.
same point of time, if they are having some doubts and questions related to that, so we're gonna discuss that as well, right? So let
Right.
me just share my screen. Just give me a moment. Yeah, I believe my screen is visible to all of you. Great. So very first thing, very warm welcome to the session. First of all, guys. So now the very first thing is about AlmaBetter. So as you might have already got to know that we are an upskilling platform, being founded in the year 2020. Right. So here we're gonna discuss very first thing that how basically this learning platform gonna help you to land up or upskill yourself, and basically the freshers or fresh graduates who are looking to get into software development industry. Right. What kind of extra benefits do we have, and how we gonna help you out in that. Right. Now, the very first thing about AlmaBetter is the a community first learning approach, which we normally follow. Like, if you guys will be able to relate to it, because in our school days, in our college days, we used to do peer to peer learning, right? When we used to sit in a group, discuss every single thing over there, we get resolutions very easily, right? And we get to share ideas with everyone, right? That is what exactly our motive is. A community first learning approach we follow, where you get to learn and get motivated from each other. At the same point of time, your batchmates would be there present in the group, particularly of yours, when you would be enrolled in one of our batch, right? You can do project in teams, you can discuss certain ideas, right? And also add on that ideas into your particular project, which gonna gain weightage in your portfolio. Because as Vikas sir discussed totally about this particular session, that how you're gonna land up and have an excellent software development department, right? At the same point of time, you guys also know that to justify your skill set, you need to have a practical hands-on as well, right? And when you do all these learnings in community wise, this actually helps you to grow further. At the same point of time, when you do networking with the industry professionals, your mentors and our alumni, you become a part of our learning community, which you get access for lifetime, which at the same point of time helps you in providing multiple opportunities going ahead, right? Because as you all know, guys, in IT industry, networking plays a very important role, right? So these are the three things we follow as a very first learning approach in this particular platform, right? Now let's move ahead. That why Alma better? So nowadays, like, we get lot of options available into the market, into the industry, right? So basically, why should anyone choose Alma better as a first priority, right? So very first thing I want to share with you guys, the most important thing, which is a structured industry relevant curriculum covering topics from basics to advanced. Now what I mean over here is there are a lot of candidates who come completely as a fresher, right? Want to start everything from scratch. For them also, we start everything from scratch, and it actually is an ideal particular point of view for them, right? But there are some candidates who are already working in software development industry, looking to upskill themselves, get better opportunity going ahead. The advanced skill set also they're gonna get up over here. Now the very next thing is live sessions, right? When you get access to live sessions, when you sit with your faculty discussing everything like Vikas have discussed today, you're gonna able to share your questions and doubts and get resolutions of that. And also with lifetime access to recorded lecture. So in future, when the program is completely over, you are into the industry. If you're working on a project, you want to brush up your basic skill set, you can access the dashboard and go through the basics as well, right? Coming to the project part, in this particular program, we cover up 20 plus capstone project along with 1,000 plus coding problems and assessment, through which you want to master up your skill set, which will be required going ahead in this particular industry, right? Now, when it comes to doubts resolution, basically a lot of you guys would be having question that how shall we ask the doubts when live classes are not going on, right? So what we exactly do, we make doubt resolution experts available, right, every day, where you can join the session with them in this AirMeet platform from your dashboard and ask your doubts right away and get the resolution, along with one-on-one mentorship. The most important thing in this industry, which we talk about, is someone who can guide you, sit with you one-on-one, and discuss with you the structured pathway, what needs to be done, what not needs to be done. So we have industrial experts over here in our program who gonna provide you that mentor session, right? From your dashboard, you can access that. Before the placement part, 50 plus mock interviews you're gonna be having with us. Once you complete the program, once you clear the test with us, right? We start the placement services where mock interviews with industrial experts actually gives you an idea, guys, that how every stage and how every step particularly will look like. If I'm sitting in an interview with a recruiter, with an interviewer, I would be already knowing that what kind of expectations are there in every stage, particularly. Then the last and most important thing, but not the least, 100% job guarantee, because we have 700 plus hiring partners with us who directly hire from us. right? So let me just showcase you basically like how the learning activities take place over here. So very first thing, to basically give you a brief over there for technical skill sets, as you can see on my screen, live lectures, lab experiments, project assignments, group discussion. These all are inclusively we have over here collectively, which gonna help you to brush up and master up on your technical skill set. For motivation and industry exposure, one-on-one mentorship, guest lectures, and as well as your community participation. This is gonna help you to motivate yourself day in and out, right? If you have a particular vision in your mind, particular plan of action and goal, so at the same point of time, someone who is already there holding up your back, then at the same point of time, you achieve that particular amount of growth as soon as possible. Now the very next thing is AlmaX. So basically AlmaX is the placement services which we do. What exactly the mandatory pointers for that is, capstone project needs to be done, competency challenges needs to be clear, right? There we conduct a test which you need to clear. Then you move ahead with AlmaX, which is our the placement career services we provide. Right now, as we discussed earlier, that we have 100% placement assurance. So here are few glimpses of the companies who directly hire from us. As you can see on my screen, guys, we have more than 700 plus companies directly hire from us, in which top companies like Amazon, Uber, Novartis, Myntra, Vedantu. So tech MNCs, startups from multiple industries, you're gonna find us over here, right? Who directly hire from us, right? So you can see basically like when you get this much of exposure, this much of opportunity through a particular platform, then getting increment in the chances of getting hired actually is the possibility which we look for, right? Now when you see that this kind of companies are directly hired from us, they're hiring from us right now, right? So at the same point of time, you can gain the confidence that yes, the platform is actually providing something which is different from others, right? Now let's see how the salary distribution of graduates looks like, right? When it comes to the average packages, right? You can see on my screen, guys, we have data over here where the proportion of students and salary packages are being mentioned. Where you can see from 5 to 7, and the minimum 5 is what we guarantee in this particular program of full stack development, right? Where 5 to 7 LPA, we get 90% of candidate on an average who crack that. Apart from that, 7 to 8 LPA, there is 29%, and the most we get is from 8 to 9 LPA. Then accordingly it goes on according to your kind of input what you will be putting, and the way the amount of input you will be putting, guys, over here, the kind of output you will be getting as well, as we all know, right? So your sheer dedication into the program will actually decide what kind of outcome you can expect from this particular program, because we have ample amount of resources which you need to utilize, and we look professionals like that only. You can utilize those resources and gain multiple success over here and become a success story of our platform. That is the thing. Now let's talk about your instructors and mentors, guys. As you can see on my screen, there are few instructors and mentors which we have collectively mentioned over here, like Rachit Jain working as a data scientist in BCG, Ravi Ranjan is there working as data scientist, Publicist Sapien. So like basically the instructors which we have are industry experts, know what exactly needs to be done and what not, so that they can guide you what is the requirement of the industry going on nowadays, right? Even learning from someone who is from industry itself gives you an idea in depth that what exactly we need to go on with, and what pace we need to go on with, and what structure we need to follow this thing on, right? Same point of time, like a candidate who is actually targeting a product based tech MNC like Microsoft, Google, or Amazon, right? So if a faculty coming from that particular domain working in that particular company, right, can guide him in a better way, right, in terms of mentor session, in terms of live classes as an instructor of the particular candidate, right? So these are the instructors and mentors we have who are taking the sessions live in our particular program in different modules. Then let's talk about success story, guys. So you would be having few of the questions like how come like placements look like. So here you can see few of the success stories we have mentioned, which we're gonna share with you as well. I'm gonna share a link with you guys where you can connect with me one on one, right, and our team, where we can discuss everything in and out, share every details in and out, right? Few of collectively I have taken it on my screen, success stories who come from different domain and actually got into the industry through our placement services, like Rehan is there, Autoprova is there, Sri Sivan and Vashan is there, right? Who got placed in good companies through us, right? As student dashboard is something what already you have gone through, guys, as Vikas sir have shown you that what are the different aspects of student dashboard looks like, how you can book a mentor session, how you can get a structured pathway through that particular dashboard, how you can practice the assignments and coding over there, how this IDE is integrated. You do not need to go to a separate IDE just to solve your coding assignments or problems, right? It's everything is a one-stop solution, you can say, which you're gonna get in your particular dashboard. The link is already shared to you in the chat box, which you can access any point of time and get some idea, get some brief from there. Right now, let's come into the question and answer part, right? Q&A part, so that we can discuss everything over here. You guys can ask me questions, anything if you have, right? So we're gonna answer you in that point of view. So Upendra has already asked the question earlier. So at that point of time, Upendra, sorry, the current scenario, which course will be better for us, web development or data science? So Upendra is completely dependent upon your choice, what exactly you are looking for. Because software development is something where hardcore coding is required. Data science is a domain where minimal amount of coding is required. But coding is there in both of the domain, right? Which actually suits you in a perfect way. Both of the programs we have. Today's session was about software development. If you feel like if you have gained confidence today by seeing this session, that how we can enter into the industry, how we can excel in the domain of software development. If you're getting confidence on that, you can take this up as a career option because both of the domain are booming at the same point of time. So we have few of the candidates already available in the session, guys. Just wanted to ask you, like, if you have any questions, any doubts which you want to ask, you can ask me right away. We can discuss everything over here. Any questions, any doubt, guys? Anything which you have. We have a lot of candidates present over here. I believe I have not made it so boring for you, and the session was not boring at all. So I want some interaction, guys, so that I can at least feel that you are available with us. And if all the doubts are clear, that's really great. So our team gonna get in touch with you guys. I will just share a link with you over in the chat box. Just give me a moment.
I've already, I think, answered a lot of questions in the Q&A. Okay. So,
Okay. So this was it from my side, sir.
okay.
Like I have shared the link.
Okay,
So
great. Cool, folks. So I think, yeah, we can wrap up this session. So thank you all for being such a wonderful audience, right? And thanks to the AlmaBetter team for, yeah, sharing other details regarding the course as well. So if you guys are interested, please reach out to the team and enroll today, right? So there's so much to learn, so much to unpack, right? And hopefully, you guys really achieve what you are trying to do. So wish you guys all the best. So keep learning, and yeah, hopefully, yeah, we'll meet again then. Cool, guys. Chalo, bye. Take care, and we'll yeah, close this session now. Okay. Thank you.